Hey everybody, we are on to photo challenge number 11. And that challenge is cutting out interesting shapes, or to put it another way, creating abstract photos. So what do I mean by that? I think it's good to understand the meanings of words. And a word that's kind of similar to abstract is extract. That prefix X means out of or from something, and hence we get words like exit, excavate, extinguish, right? We're pulling something out. But abstract has a different prefix. It's ABS, and that prefix means apart or to disassociate. And words that hark to that are words like absent, right? Abstain. So abstraction, if you want to have a definition, would be expressing a quality that's apart or disassociated from an object. Now, that sounds a little abstract, to use a pun, but I think the best way of understanding what I mean by expressing a quality that's apart or disassociated from an object is by looking at a picture. So here's one that I took with my point and shoot camera. It's actually a photograph of a lamp that's on the exterior of the Macy's building on 34th Street. And what I liked about it was the shape that this lamp formed when I looked up at it. So what I did here was I didn't really care that it was a lamp, quite frankly. If I wanted to take a photo of it being a lamp, I probably would have taken the photo the way most people would. I would have just photographed it head on so you can clearly see that it's a lamp. You can clearly see it's on a building. Perhaps even make it clear that it's Macy's, since it's such an iconic landmark. But none of that interested me. What I liked was the shape. I liked the colors of it. I liked even the reflection off the side of the building. And so I took it from the point of view of where I was standing. And as a result, it's almost like looking at it if I were a Martian, which some people think I might be, or an extraterrestrial, where I don't know that it's a lamp. I just know it's a thing, it's an object. And so what's intriguing to me is the shape of that object. So that's kind of what I mean by expressing a quality, in this case the shapes, the lines, the color, right, the mass and space. Expressing a quality that's apart or disassociated from an object, or in this case lampness, right? It's not about it being a lamp. Here's another situation, very similar. This is the breezeway. It's like a passageway in between the avenues in Manhattan, and this goes through the Marriott Hotel. And I really liked all these geometric shapes that were created from this area, not on the floor, also the glass, and even the ceiling. And I chose to drain the color away to make the shapes even more, more prominent. Whereas if I had the color, it might distract a little bit. And the color would also give you more information, right? Color is information, and it would more clearly show that it is a space. Whereas I didn't really care that it was a space. I just liked the shapes that it was created, hence an abstraction. Here's another photo. This is on 6th Avenue. It's a Time Life building. I took this with my phone, an iPhone in this case. And I'm just pointing that out because I want to make it clear that it's not about the camera. It's not about the technology. It's not about having a Leica or some other fancy schmancy camera. You can use a cell phone and still get a really good picture, in my opinion, because it's about seeing. It's about the art of seeing. It's about using the best piece of equipment that you have, which is the one that's in between your ears. It's your brain, and using your brain to look and to see critically. What's great about brains is that they're much easier to upgrade. It's just a matter of study and learning, as opposed to fooling around with getting a brand new phone and getting new software installed and all that stuff. So here, this is the Time Life building. I really like the color. The blue is kind of warm because it was morning light that was hitting it. I like the vertical lines. I also like the reflections against the pool that's in front of the building. This fellow with the flowers, I saw him walking, so I waited so that he would get pretty close to the center of the picture, and then I just framed the shot. you'll see that what I did here, as I did with the previous pictures, is that it's not just about what I'm photographing, it's also about what I'm not photographing, what I'm excluding from the image. So this cropping I took, took place within my camera. I didn't crop it afterwards. I didn't use any apps or anything like that. It's just about, excluding things that will give you more identification of what the object is. So in other words, I didn't want to have parts in the image that show the windows or show the street or show the crowds or any of that stuff, because then you would start thinking, oh, building. Whereas I didn't want to think about the building. I really wanted to focus on the abstract shapes here. This is another example. This was taken with my point and shoot camera. It's a very good camera, but it's, as you can see, whether it's an iPhone picture or a high-end point and shoot, it's really about the seeing. So this is a picture, same vantage point, cooler looking picture as far as the color temperature. It's a little bit on the cooler side, different time of day, different season. And also this picture was more about the shadow. This incredible shadow just happened to line up with the vertical architectural feature of the building, and that's kind of what I was going for there. So even when within the same subject, if you're patient and you look critically, you can get variations on a theme. This is a corridor, an exterior corridor on 6th Avenue on the UBS building. It's not a particularly interesting looking corridor. However, this was towards the end of the day, where the light was starting to, well, the sun was setting is what it was. And so it casts these very stark, crisp shadows against the columns and also against the little seats and the table there. And so here, again, I was trying to, I wanted to emphasize a shape or a geometry or a vision that was apart from or disassociated from the building itself. It's really not about the building. If I wanted to take a picture of the building and say I'm a tourist in Manhattan, you would clearly see the front door of the building, you would see the revolving doors, you'd see the UBS logo, maybe a security guard there, the street, people walking by. We've seen millions of pictures like that, right? That's very commonplace. Here I took something that is even more commonplace and less interesting because it's the side of the building, and I try to make it interesting and creative and perhaps even mysterious by playing with the light, the line, and also the mass and the space. Speaking of revolving doors, this is a photo of revolving doors. Very abstract, very chaotic, kind of like New York City itself. It's about lines and rectangles and all that, but there's also lots of reflections that kind of give you these other textures. So very few people, I think, would consider taking a photograph or a portrait, if you will, of a revolving door. But a revolving door can be very interesting if you forget that it's a revolving door and just look at what the revolving door is doing, which is reflecting. It's got different shapes. There are curves that also affect the perception. Here's another picture too that I wanted to draw attention to, because I don't want you to think it's all about geometry. It's all about straight lines and rectangles and squares. It could also, and it doesn't have to be objects either necessarily. It could also be people, and it can be their shadows, as is the case here, and it could be lines that form curves. This is a photo that I took at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I had a student photographer with me, so that's his shadow you're seeing. And it just so happened that his posture almost kind of mimicked or echoed the shape of the shadow cast by the garbage can. And because of that, I also framed it where it's a very extreme Dutch angle, if you're familiar with Dutch angles from my seminars. And so it just gives you a very different perspective on something that maybe people see all the time, walk by. It registers in their mind because they're seeing it, but it's not really registering as an image. if people are at the Met, they're going to take a picture of the Met. So they're going to take a picture of all the stairs and all the people up there, and the big banners are announcing whatever exhibit they have going on. None of that mattered to me. I've seen that a million times. This was more interesting to me because it was a moment that was completely serendipitous, and it's very stark, and it's about the shapes, and it's just a different kind of a picture of the everyday. Now, again, abstract pictures can include people. In this case, it's not a shadow. You can actually see the person. It's pretty clear this is pre-COVID because this is in Times Square. There's lots of people in the background. But you can use abstraction, as I mentioned, to exclude things that identify more clearly what you're looking at. And by doing so, you can create mystery. You can create almost a hallucinatory image. Lots of people are very intrigued by this image because they don't really know what's going on. You have this fellow who's like in a trance, if you look at his eyes, and then you have this essence or this mist or fog coming out of his brain, coming out of his head. What's going on here? And then you have people around him who don't seem to be indifferent to it. So I'll let you in on what it is. This is a street performer, and there were all these children around him. They were the children of tourists. And he was creating these massively huge bubbles with this big hoop that he had. And this particular bubble was right by his head, and he was looking intently at it. And I just happened to catch that moment, and I framed my shot to exclude the remainder of the bubble. So it's just the part that's coming out of his head. And again, by going black and white, in this case it's a warm tone, black and white, the lack of color information also makes it hard to decipher what's going on. Now, I don't want you to think it's also all about color. Draining color is not going to give you an abstract picture necessarily. I also don't want you to think that I got these pictures and they're interesting because I happen to be in Manhattan. It's not about being in Manhattan pre-COVID or you're in some kind of an urban area. Of course, there's a lot more subject matter to shoot there. But bear in mind, okay, I shoot wherever I happen to be. I don't have to travel to some exotic locale to get great pictures. I'm in Manhattan every day almost, at least before COVID hit. And these pictures that I'm showing you, I'm not exaggerating, I was not on the street for more than 5 or 10 minutes because I'm rushing to and from Penn Station and to where I have to be. So I only have a few moments. I'm walking as I'm shooting. I'm not hanging out in a corner all day waiting for the moment to arise. So bear that in mind. During these pandemic times, you might be at home. You might be, maybe the scope of your travels is no further than your yard or your neighborhood. You can still find great opportunities for photos. This is a photo that I took. It's the stoop of my house, the steps. So as I'm walking out, I just happened to catch from the corner of my eye this glistening from the spider webs. There were little water droplets on it, and it was reflecting the light, reflecting the sky actually, which is why it's blue. And this is no bigger than the thumbnail. Literally, the thumbnail on your finger. I mean, that's all. It's very, very small. But I happened to catch it. I used my iPhone on this, so again, no fancy schmancy camera. I just got up really close to it, so I didn't use any fancy close-up lens. And this is the result I got. It looks almost like a Mandelbrot set, if you're familiar with what a Mandelbrot set is. And if you're not, look it up. It's Mandelbrot, one word. But that's kind of what it looks like, which is why it caught my attention. This I took maybe 3 or 4 days ago. I was outside my studio talking to my office manager, who we were standing in front of her car. And as I'm speaking to her, my eye is kind of drifting to these wonderful shapes that I saw. It was almost kaleidoscopic because it kept changing as I moved. And this was literally from the hood of her car. That's what it is. The hood of her car became my free Photoshop. And just by moving my head slightly and my camera slightly, I got these really interesting shapes. Looks almost like, is it Rorschach? Is that what they call it? But it kind of gave you these really interesting shapes. And again, this is just my phone. It's not a fancy camera. I didn't drain the color in this case. I just used the color that was there. I did probably, in fact I did boost the saturation a little bit. Digital photos tend to be a little washed out by their nature unless you have a really, really high-end camera. So it's not unusual to have to add in or boost a little bit of the saturation and the contrast. But we're talking very tiny amounts, very small, very subtle. So there's no app that I'm using here. There's no fancy schmancy photoshopping going on. It's just looking critically and trying to find those moments. So that's the challenge for this month. I'm really looking forward to seeing how you take these ideas and apply them in your own setting. When you post your pictures, make sure to use the # followed by PC11. This way we can find the pictures. Also, make sure to like and comment as many pictures as you can. I know it's hard to do. I have a hard time with it as well as I'm busy with photo projects, but the liking is encouraging to people. It keeps them going and taking pictures as they know now that their pictures are at least being seen. And comments can be very helpful too. They can be encouraging, they can also be educational. The other thing too is that liking and commenting, what it does is Facebook has these algorithms, and the more that an image or post is liked and commented upon, the more likely it's going to appear on someone's feed, someone who may not be part of the group already. So it's a great way for us to get more exposure of what we're doing to people we're not connected with, and some of those folks might want to join the group. In fact, if you have friends and family members and colleagues and neighbors who you think might be interested in this, I encourage you to invite them to the group. If you have questions, feel free to post them on the group page, or if you're kind of shy, you're welcome to email me directly, or you can just message me on Facebook. But do consider posting it to, on the group page. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Believe me, there really isn't. And your question is very likely to be something that someone else has a question on. So it helps everybody if you can post those. So that's pretty much it. I mean, you're welcome as a starting point to emulate some of my pictures if you want to do that. But I encourage you to think out of the box and act like you're an extraterrestrial and forget about what it is that you're looking at. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I might have mentioned it in my workshops. Claude Monet, a very famous French Impressionist painter, if you're not familiar with Claude Monet, had famously said that he wished that he was blind, and then he would suddenly regain his sight and then start painting. Because by doing so, he would be able to look at the world around him as it really is, as opposed to the way he's preconceiving it to be, right? So again, this picture here, it didn't matter to me that it was a car hood, right? If I was focused on it being a car hood, I wouldn't have even taken the picture. I've seen car hoods before. Why would I want a photo of that? Or if I did take a picture of the car hood, I would have made sure that it looked like a car hood, right? So you see the headlights and the windshield. It didn't matter to me. I just saw it as free Photoshop. I just saw it as a surface that was reflecting these really interesting shapes. It didn't even matter to me that they happened to be the trees above me. And that's what I photographed. And it makes for a picture that's unusual and different. You may not like it, and that's fine. Maybe you hate abstract pictures. Maybe you hate every single picture I've showed you. But you got to at least admit they're different. They're not commonplace. They're not like other pictures you've seen. And I think if we push ourselves to those extremes, then even when we do take pictures that are more traditional or more commonplace, maybe you're photographing a group of people, a portrait, you may just introduce a small factor that makes your picture different from everybody else's. All right? So there you go. That's PC11. And again, just get busy, have some fun, and let's see what you all come up with.